Hello, everyone. Today we have a very special guest, a great friend of mine, colleague of mine, Ray Ottman with the University of Arkansas Fort Smith. He is the chief of the parking division there at the university. Ray and I have been working together for about 7 years now. It's been a wonderful experience, and he's actually going to be our first guest on our Park Your Thoughts podcast. And we definitely appreciate his time and looking forward to learning more about him and the university and kind of where things are going in the parking industry. I want to quickly introduce my co-host as well, Laura Skulman.
Hey, I might hop right in. So, Ray, you were hired on as the chief of police when there was no existent program over at University of Arkansas Fort Smith. Can you describe kind of like how that need was identified? What was that process like?
Absolutely. So it was identified, prior to me coming, and it was going to be one of the list items for the new chief to implement. The idea was to develop, implement, and run a comprehensive parking program. So that process was already in place as far as an idea, because in higher education, it's not a term they use a lot is silos, like everything on one campus might be in a silo, from each other. But if you've been on one college campus, you've probably been on 10, 20, 30, especially faculty and staff, and especially administration. So they hear about other programs. They know if I go here, I got to get a parking pass, or I got to do, go to a hog game, I got to pay for parking. So there was a lot of thought going into it, like, why don't we have one already? And then you started to see an increase in a lot of school shootings and a lot of campus crime, a lot of violent campus crime. And one of the things that comes out of those debriefings is a lot of times they will find out this car wasn't registered here, or this person wasn't registered here. And it's all because of parking that a lot of these crimes are sometimes solved a lot faster or identified, the suspects. So it made sense to have something on file where we could know who's on our campus and maybe where they're at on campus as well. And when you start directing that, you start to have a lot of impact in a lot of areas. So when I was hired on, it was said, hey, we want this to go forward. And I was hired on early of 2015. And they wanted the program in place fall of 16, going completely in place. So I went to work. I was given Weldon Williams lit contact. Philip and I met up. I think Philip and I have been together the whole time, developing not just the parking permits, but developing some ideas as to how to incorporate that into our campus. So it came up before I got here. It was a charge of mine to get running and get going. And the driver for it was safety. It was not revenue generation. That's never the primary focus. It's easy to point to that, and people want to say that, but it was not revenue generated. It was safety driven. The Oregon Community College shooting was about the time I was coming on. And when that went national, you saw some cars that were not allowed to leave. And out of that came some people that were not supposed to. This person's not registered here. So who does it register to? Who's this person? Who do we know? Who do we not know? And because of that, I think parking on college campuses just got a higher profile. So we went from there, and I came from a university. I might be jumping some questions here, so
No, go ahead. This is awesome.
But as part of my background, I came from another university. I was a police lieutenant on another campus that had a very well-established campus parking program. And because of that, I had a pretty strong knowledge base of what a parking program looked like, how it's run, the needs of that program. And then coming here, you have to basically customize it. So you have to look at your needs, look at what the campus overall looks like, and then put into place. So that was how it all came to be, and why we came to be.
That's so cool. So you had kind of already worked alongside someone developing a parking program. I guess, is that like super common if somebody was going to hop into a position like this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's a transition, and you'll see it across the board. Different size universities and different size industries, right, will have different titles or different where it's housed. In a smaller campus like ours, we don't have a transportation department. per se. Well, on a larger campus, you'll see a lot of the parking program housed under parking and transportation, because the needs kind of go hand in hand, and they can kind of funnel and fund and what have you, all those needs under one umbrella. But on our campus, we don't have transportation directors. We don't have public we don't have a transit bus like Razorback Rail or anything like that. So it's housed in our campus in the police department. Parking is, and I serve as the chief of police and the director, and in the parking, I oversee parking. On other campuses, you will see it housed out of a plant operations potentially, or an environmental services type, where it's under the transportation and parking. And it's not uncommon for those two to be together on larger campuses. So that's where we are, smaller. So we just have I wear a couple of different hats. But
No,
working side by side somebody, though, I would say is common, and it's very necessary to have that knowledge base of what a parking program needs and how to evolve, because you will start a program and you'll have parameters, and that will change. You might close a road, for instance, 1 year after you start a program, and your
never
needs
happened.
change. Yeah, it never happens, right? That's an inside joke between Philip and I, because we started this program in fall of 16, and in the winter of 16 we closed a major thoroughfare through campus. It was a public street, and that just throws your transportation off. Our parking lot became a roadway, and that changes your looks on things. So having that side by side working knowledge is vitally important. Though someone who wants to get into the parking industry should definitely look at working within it first before leading it, well, without question.
No, that's perfect. And I kind of want to dive into that a little bit as well, going from lieutenant to chief and kind of, working under someone for so many years, and then, bam, there you are, and it's you, and you have all these responsibilities, and, the most important thing is safety, security. And, what would you say were some of your initial goals when you first got going? And did you have to set any expectations internally?
Absolutely. That's a great point. I will say that working with the leader that mentored me is my best friend, and he's a great leader. And he taught us to always fail and make sure you fail forward. That whatever you're doing, as long as you're trying something, we're doing podcast number 1. So we're going forward, right? He always taught us to fail, and fail greatly, but fail forward. And so coming in, I had the attitude of, I can do this, and I know I can do it, but I need help. So I looked for help, and then setting those internal parameters. Yes, we had goals. And the first goal was to make sure that the communication went out to the stakeholders, that the reason for the program, that it was not revenue. And it's obvious it's not revenue, because Philip, how ours is staged. We're not charging everybody. So it's not about revenue. But we wanted to make sure that first communication piece was fulfilled. And that is, we're going to have a comprehensive program for parking on campus, and it's going to involve registering your vehicles, and some will pay, some will not. But the reason for it is safety. And we wanted to make sure that everyone understood that was the goal. I will say that we did our very best, but when you're trying to communicate a change, sometimes it doesn't matter. No matter what your message is, no matter how well you do it, it's going to be met with resistance, and there's going to be a lot of questions of it. Dr. Barron went out in front of faculty first with his announcement. I had already been doing focus group meetings with students, and they already were aware of the oncoming program. But if I could go back and change something, I would go back and we would start with the students first with the announcement, and then go forward and just coordinate the message a little better. Because if you have a redo, hopefully you would do it better, and that would be an area for that. But the setting the goals, the main goal was to communicate first and foremost why we're doing this, and then secondly was we wanted to have as comprehensive a program as possible, but also as simple as possible. We did not want to make this hard. We didn't want to make it to where you had to park in Elma to come to class. That was not what we were after. We're very fortunate at UA Fort Smith in that our campus is flat. It's pretty small, and all the parking spaces are in relative close positioning to the buildings that you might want to go into. So we're very fortunate with that. But in everything we were setting our goals up, we were trying to make it as easy for the user as possible. And sometimes you sacrifice easy for yourself when you do that. And we were a two-person shop at the time. It was me and my unbelievable first in line, Tiffany Johnson. She jumped on board and helped immensely. But there was a lot of unknowns there, and we were trying to hit targets, and we were trying to hit things that we weren't sure of. So those were the things internally. And then you bump up against systems that don't talk to each other, and that is awful when you're implementing a change.
Mhm.
So we were dealing with that, and we were dealing with people that said we've always done it one way. Why do we have to change? We've never had to register our vehicles at EWAR. We've never had to do it West Arc. We've never had, and you just say yes, you're right, and you say now we're going to do it this way, and you try to make that transition as easy as possible. But internally, the targets we were trying to hit were to make the safety the known fact of that's what we were doing. And I'll share a statistic with you that we shared after implementing. We'd come back and talk about it. We had to come back and say, this is what we've done and what we're doing. But in the first full year after implementation of the parking program, we had a 56% reduction in accidents on campus. And I will say that, and it was 100% reduction in injury accidents. It was 56% overall. And one of the reasons for that is because we were directing traffic to other areas. They weren't all trying to come to one area to get a parking spot. If you didn't have a blue permit, you couldn't come to that lot, where before everybody came to that, easy spot first. So one of the byproducts of this was safety, right? We knew who's here on campus, but we also reduced traffic accidents 56%. And we're proud of that. And we've been able to maintain that low level of accidents because through the parking program, it wasn't just permits and it wasn't just ticketing, but we improved our signage as well. Because you can't just implement a parking program and not have signage up. So we put up signage, but we also increased our traffic signage, and we also increased some other lighting that came out of it in year 2 and 3. So those were all things that we were trying to hit internally, and I think we did a pretty good job.
Yeah, most definitely. I remember, us having the conversation, and it always with you, and it always went back to safety and security of the university.
Absolutely.
How better. I also remember talking about, even though it wasn't the main priority, but, just revenue and how, the parking operation, how well it did in terms of revenue. And
absolutely. Yep. And that's a great point, because it's hard. You can't get away from the fact that you're obviously raising money, right? And the students have a right to know, okay, you're charging us now. What are you doing with the money? And we have certainly been transparent throughout this process in that we were establishing we were trying to establish the funding so that the maintenance of the parking related, not just parking lots, but sidewalks, roadways, curbing. And then the first area that we addressed, I believe it was in year 2 or 3 of the parking program, we improved interior lighting across the campus on the interior of campus. So it's exterior lights on the interior of campus. And it was about $180,000 project. Well, when you don't have that revenue source to start with, it's hard to do things. And we did that in I believe it was year 2. And automatically it was noticeable. It was like, whoa, we are now doing LEDs. It's, so again, safety at night, safety in the early hour mornings, students walking back and forth, studying, library to residence halls. All of those things were improved. And just that general sense of safety was improved. But now this year, I can share with you that this summer, we are going to be doing improvements in 5 parking lots on campus. And that is all because the parking program was able to, over the years, not stash money or hide money, but to be able to build up the fund, because it's not cheap. When you talk about asphalt parking lots and a mill and overlay, it's not cheap. And certainly having that money on hand relieves the budget in other areas. So I'm excited. I'm meeting with the general contractor this week to get the scope of work. We already have the scope pretty much defined, but we're improving 5 different lots this summer. We're going to do a couple more next summer, and then we'll be on that maintenance schedule that everybody wants to be on. And it's only possible because of the parking program.
That is so cool. I was kind of thinking about that earlier today when I was reflecting on this call we were going to have, thinking
Yes.
about a chief of police and how I assumed that like a lot of it had to do with fundraising. So I was trying to imagine, like, do you have to throw galas or something for a
Right.
party?
No, exactly. Well, there are different funding models across the country, and I know our listeners will be saying, wait a minute, our safety program is student fee funded, because there are a lot of universities that have a student fee that pays for their safety. And we're not there yet. Thankfully, we're not. We use allocations from the general budget and general revenue fund. So we're fortunate that our students are not paying that, but on a lot of campuses, they are. And in a lot of campuses, they will use parking fees for cameras, running camera systems throughout the parking lots, or something like that that kind of goes hand in hand with safety, but it's an additional fee. And if you don't, and here's what I mean by that, you don't have to park on our campus, right? It's an option. You choose to. Well, if you were taking an online class at some universities, you got to pay a parking fee regardless, even though you're not going to be sitting on foot on campus. It's a mandatory fee. Well, here at UAFS, we don't have that. It is, if you park, you have to get a permit. But if you don't park on campus or you ride, you get maybe a bike or you foot it, or you're living in the residence halls and you don't have a car on campus, you're not paying a parking fee. So that so far has been a good enough model for us, and we've been able to manage that program under those restraints, and we're happy about that. Thankfully, I'm not having to raise too many funds yet. We'll see year one after pandemic, but we'll see.
I'll help you throw a gala. That sounds like
I love it. Yes.
So we already kind of touched on how like paid parking is totally not a popular situation, and
Yep.
It's really smart, like how you pointed out that just communication was like one of your first MOs. Do you have any kind of nuggets of like how people should go about that? Because after you just explained it, I'm like, oh yeah, take my money. I will. I want to pay for a parking pass
Right.
now, but you
Yep.
obviously didn't have time to have these one-on-ones.
Well, what we did was I went out and did informal focus groups with different students that I saw meeting in different spots on campus. So I knew where our resident students obviously lived. So I could go to them and meet with them there and talk about parking and what their needs were and kind of what their thoughts were. And I knew in the campus center where our commuter students who were hanging out in between classes before they drove somewhere else were hanging out. So I'd go have meetings with those as well. And then as well as meeting with your different representation. And SGA, which is Student Government Association, is very key. I would say for anybody who's thinking about a change or a new program, first and foremost, get with your SGA reps and discuss it, because they're the ones that are going to help you sell it. They're going to be the ones who help you and support you in it, because they're also going to be your biggest critics. They're going to be the ones that call you to the meeting every year and say, hey, you said last year that you were going to do this and you didn't do it. Why not? And if you already have a relationship built with them and a trust, it makes everything implementation a lot smoother. So I would say if there's one nugget, I would say is meet with everybody informally up front, discuss the parameters. You don't say anything's set in stone, because you don't know if it is. Things can change overnight, like it happened here. Dr. Barron overnight, without telling anybody, changed something that was a pretty big piece of the puzzle. And we had to be pretty agile and adjust to that after the fact. So don't sell anything as being concrete until the announcement. But what I found in talking with the students that made it a little bit easier discussion with the administration, most of our students were paying or at least registering vehicles to park at their high schools before they came here. So it was not something new to them. I mean, and then almost everybody that said, oh yeah, when I go visit so-and-so on the Hill, which is up in Fayetteville, for those of you listening who don't know what that was, they said, yeah, we got to park in a certain lot, or we got to get a visitor permit. So yeah, why don't we have one here already? So the attitude with the students was the new students was very good. Now the students who have been here 2 or 3 years, they were the ones who had the biggest questions. So I had to spend the most time with them, because nobody wants a new fee, and I get it. But we're going into year 6 or 7 now, and everybody on campus has been a part of the program, and it's just easy to transition for anybody coming in.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you gave that nugget about the SGA.
Yeah.
I'm like
Well,
thinking about college, and when I saw the people running for that, I had no idea what they did. So
yeah, well, and that's a great point. And from my point, being the police chief, it gives me just one more. I'm already going to the meeting from the police side. So having parking, it was just a natural fit that I could have one more topic to talk about at the meeting, and just the more contact points you have now. And then there's also faculty senate, and faculty are I'm just going to say they're a very special group of people, and their needs and their questions are very much important to understand where they're coming from. And as long as you explain something 800 times, I think they might get it, but they want what they want and they have reasons for it. But if they understand where they fit in the bigger picture of the whole program, it goes a long way towards easing those phone calls and emails and complaints. It really does.
So would you say faculty is more difficult than students?
They certainly can be on some aspects, but again, you're also talking about a mindset, right? Because before, they could just show up and park wherever they wanted, and not have to compete, maybe, or they might be able to show up at a certain time of day, and it's a lot easier to park here than it is there. So we took all those things into consideration when we developed where a permit can be valid at. And when we did that, and we explained, no, you don't have to just park in a blue, because a blue permit also lets you park in a green. When they understood that, they're like, oh, so ours is kind of like an all-encompassing permit. Then it made sense, and it certainly helped them ease their mind a little bit. Yeah, but no, I love working with the faculty, because you can start with a small group and go to a large group, and you're going to hear everything in between, just like you do with student groups. But last year, we started to charge our faculty. Our faculty and staff currently do not pay to park on campus. We give them their first permit free, which is very unusual. We are probably one of the very, very few that do that. And they understand that and they recognize that. But what that started to turn into was a little bit of an abuse option, in that if they had a student that came to school here, they would get 2 or 3 permits, and maybe it wasn't theirs and maybe it was the students. So we had to kind of put a stop to that. And so we started to charge for the second permit, a small amount, but it was charged if you get an additional permit. Well, that transition was easy because I had coffee with 2 members of the faculty senate. We just went to coffee. I explained why we were doing what we were doing. They said, absolutely, we understand, and we can go back to faculty senate and sell this easy. And there was no resistance. So again, those relationships they're just mandatory. You have to have those in place.
Yeah, most definitely. Speaking of relationships, and some of the ones that I know you've had to build not only on campus, but around campus in the community. And, going back to the safety and security being your number one point, you talked about adding some cameras and lights and different things like that. Is there any, maybe outside of the box security features that you've added on campus that you would like to share?
Not that we've added yet. I would love to have said, yes, we came up with this great idea or that. But I think one thing that, going to the conferences and learning from people who have already been there is key. So you hear about what's out there, and Philip, because the industry, the hospitals, the convention centers, all the entertainment districts, what they're already facing. So for us to hear that, it was important at the last conference, well, it was 2 years ago now, but what I think is coming, what I'd like to see happen is for the permit, when it enters a parking lot, right, and it's probably already out there, somehow be able to, it creates the data point. At this date and time, this permit was at this location. And then that data mining can take place so that if we have a stolen vehicle, a missing vehicle, maybe a missing child by name. So if we, or a student by name, that if we know there's a permit registered to that person or to someone that might be totally unrelated, that we could run that through our data set, and it could tell us maybe that the vehicle was in a location. So I think that in a larger setting where you're fighting for those spots, something like that is going to be critical. But right now we're fortunate that we haven't had a whole lot of pressure on our parking permit, our program. What I mean by that is we're about 1.3 to 1 on our parking spots for people that need them. versus some campuses that, are 7, 8, 9-1. And those are the programs that can make the money because they can certainly charge for the premier spots. But so fortunately, we're pretty soft on that.
No, that's a great point. And you talk about a little about, being able to identify certain people on campus and before they get into lots. Are you kind of looking more on the LPR where there's a camera set up? But I also know that, we talked about earlier, you closed a road that has an RFID gate. I mean, kind of what went into kind of deciding between those two, and
right,
why did that happen?
So the gate, the cost kind of prohibited us from going as far as we wanted to on the gate. And we looked at it, as we looked at our resident hall parking with that gate option. We were going to go with the PROX card that would send it up and what have you. It was a little cost prohibitive for us at that time, but when we're looking at the gates, we were certainly looking at who are we restricting and for what purposes. And because we did close the street and it is now not a city street, we still had emergency services that have to utilize it. So we had to figure out a way that like a traffic preemption device, right, could open that gate. So we went with that traffic preemption on the emergency signal that on an ambulance, firefighter, or a police, when they can send a signal from their top deck right to our receiver, and it opens that gate. So we were looking at something like that. Our public transit also does that. Our bus system in Fort Smith has the same transmitter. So we were able to do that. But certainly as campuses expand, having that infrastructure already in place it makes it so much easier to build on that program versus having to build it.
Makes perfect sense. I kind of have a curious question a little bit with your department.
Yeah.
Being chief of police at the university, what does that mean in terms of your jurisdiction? You just like on campus, or do you have access to the city? That's something I've always wondered.
Great question. So our commission, basically, it's a state commission. That means we have statewide jurisdiction for an arrest. But our campus is our jurisdiction for where we are commissioned to work. So anything owned by the University of Arkansas Fort Smith it would be where we would have the authority to implement any of our ordinances as well as our state laws. Can we go off campus and make an arrest? Absolutely, we can, but we coordinate that with Fort Smith or Sebastian County. If we see something while we're taking, maybe we're going to take the car down to get new tires on it, and we see something happening, can we intervene, and do we have the authority to do so? Absolutely. But from jurisdiction, from the main mindset, it is our main campus here in Fort Smith, because we own property over in Van Buren. So technically it would be within our jurisdiction, but we're not going to go patrol it. We're not going to drive over there and patrol it. But it is our commission is statewide, but mainly for the properties we own. And we can pursue off campus if something starts on campus and it goes outside the city, we certainly can. But so yes, we can still find you, Philip, wherever you go.
just wanted to check.
Noted. Well, that's really interesting to think about. I have been just like playing around with this in my head all day. It kind of blows my mind. I guess I never thought of the chief of police having to take on all of this responsibility. To me, it just really blows my mind.
Yeah, it is. Well, it blew mine as well at first, but I'm very fortunate. I've had tremendous support, and our parking coordinator, Toya Owens, right now is just fabulous. So it makes it a lot easier having good people with you, for sure.
Yeah. Well, really, I was also kind of curious about so I've been on the UPS campus a few times, and it's not there's not a ton of roads there. It's very walker friendly campus. So is it does that make it harder or less difficult to kind of figure out your traffic flow, and how do you even go about that?
That's a great question, because that came up initially with the closing of Kincaid, the portion of Kincaid. It really impacted the vehicle traffic. You're 100% right. It's pedestrian friendly, and it's very much easy to get from one side to the other in no time flat. The majority of our parking spaces are across the road on all three sides of the campus. One of those roads is closed now, so that's really easy. But Grand Avenue and Weldon are fairly busy roads, and the intersections where they meet do have, obviously, it's a controlled intersection, and we have the pedestrian crossing. It makes it difficult at those high peak times where you have a lot of students needing to get across that intersection at a short time. Underground, we do have a tunnel that goes underground that can, go underground under the Grand Avenue and come up, and that helps. But that creates challenges as well. It's a safety concern. People have a little bit of eerie walking down a stairwell under the ground and then back up. But it creates challenges. It's easy, it's fun, it's easy, and it's nice because it's also a really pretty campus on the interior. Like you're saying, sidewalks everywhere, but no roadways. It's pretty, it's easy, it makes it nice, but it does present those challenges in that you're bringing the majority of the people pedestrian-wise across two pretty busy streets. So we have to just watch that. We've been very fortunate with the city of Fort Smith. Their road, street department, as well as their transportation department, have put in the traffic signals for us that are more visible. And at a couple of them, the length of them, we've lengthened the time of them. But they've come through and put better lighting at every one of those intersections for us. We identified that with our SGA and our police department. We do a campus safety walk every year and where we identify hazards across campus. And that came up 2 years in a row. And we just said, you know what, it's not adequate. Let's get it fixed. And the city of Fort Smith said, yep, we'll fix it for you. And they did it. So those are the things the challenges that having those outlying parking lots present.
I can tell you, Ray, it is a beautiful campus. Even when I went there in the early 2000s,
yep.
It was a beautiful campus, and it's gotten bigger. You guys keep making great changes.
Yep.
It's growing, but I can still remember my freshman year and parking across the road.
Yes.
And I think I got the very last spot on campus on the first day of school because I was at the very back gate over there across the street from the church. And, I can honestly say where it was then compared to what it is now, it's a world of difference, especially over the past 5, 6, 7 years as you've implemented all these changes. It's just for the better. Being a first-time freshman and kind of experiencing that and maybe getting the last parking spot on campus. And, what would you say to that person?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say to learn to appreciate it first and foremost, because it is something that, even like when you're talking about that last spot over there by that gate, you were 1 block away from the campus, right? The main part. So I would tell them also to, when they get to parking on my campus, when you come, they used to come get the parking permits on campus. Last year, we mailed them out because of COVID. But every permit gets a map and the rules and regulations. And if you look at that map and you plan a little bit and you realize that, hey, there's a whole bunch of parking over here, and you show up and there's no one there, it might be because you don't have the right permit. Don't get that $25 ticket. But also plan. I would tell every freshman to look at that map, look at your schedule. Where are your buildings at? One of the biggest common mistakes that a lot of people make for convenience is that they have 3 classes. They park nearest their first class. And I will tell you, from somebody who does not like to walk very far, I'm going to park nearest my last class so that when I get done with the day, I got a short walk. And I would tell everybody, if you know you're going to be on building 3 at the end of the day, I would start by parking by building 3 and walk the extra to start.
Brilliant.
I wish I had that advice like 20 years ago.
I worked a job in college, and I think all I did was just raise money to pay back my parking fees. I was so bad at it.
Well, unfortunately, to this day, we have students that are slow learners, but at the same time, we're not as invasive as well. We've been asked by our administration to be a little more harsh with our 3rd and 4th tickets. In other words, on a lot of campuses, if you get a 3rd ticket, you're going to get a boot or a tow. On our campus, we have taken the approach that we will go ahead and issue the ticket and we'll make contact. And we make contact through our dean of students, Dr. Dave Stevens. If we see a pattern, right? If we see maybe something's wrong here, 3, 4, 5 tickets, we don't want that person to accumulate any more fines. So reaching out to them saying, is there something going on that maybe we're not connecting the dots? And there's a lot of examples. There's a student that said, I live in this residence hall. I thought my permit was good and I didn't go out for 3 days to check on it. And that's very common. Students that don't leave campus all week, they don't check on their cars. Well, we had written 3 tickets and we reached out and they got the email and we were able to fix that. So, instead of just towing it or booting it and incurring all those extra fines, we take the approach of reaching out and trying to correct the problem before it goes any further, because we are not about the revenue. And I absolutely hate towing a car off my campus, because it creates a problem at the end, because when that person comes to get their car, now they don't have a car and they may have an emergency. They may have to pick up a child at daycare. They may have to go to work. They may be getting some. So now we've created maybe something that is a little more harsh as a penalty than it really should have been. So we've taken that approach across the board as being a little more understanding. No, we'll still issue the ticket and they can still appeal and they can still go through that process, but we are not as invasive as a lot of campuses. As you know, Philip, a lot of campuses, boy, you're in certain areas, you're getting towed right first time, but we have not been that invasive.
Wow. I love how you humanize that. It's
important. It really is. And that came out of a lot of those meetings that we've had with our students and in the forums that we have, and those yearly meetings that we have. That came out of that. We've had parents that come out and say, I was out here visiting my child because they were getting an award. I had no idea I needed a parking permit, or my daughter didn't tell me, or my son said I could park here. A little understanding goes a long way, especially after the last year. We've had a lot of understanding for everybody.
Yeah. My excuse would have been that my TA's hours ended 15 minutes before my shift, and I'm failing stat 2500. So I just got to get here and out and let them know that I'm trying. But
yes,
I did have the boot once. It was mortifying. I'm not gonna lie.
Yes, I know. Hey, I've got parking tickets. My first 2 days of work at my previous institution, I got parking tickets. And I'm like, God, I'm parking where they told me to. And then they said, well, no, you got to do this. I understand. We've all been there.
It is. And that, that's, is that one of the biggest challenges? One of the biggest keys is that communication piece. I mean,
Yep.
you're talking about not only to the students, but you're talking about visitors that come on campus.
Yep, exactly. It's the most important component of any of our plans or any of our actions is the communication piece. And next week, we're starting on our summer orientations, and we're having 8 of them this year. At every orientation, I will be at those orientations talking about parking to mom and dads, grandmas and grandpas, and the students, how to get the permit, how to register for the permit, where to put the permit, all those things. And I do that with every single session so that we know that everyone's been made aware that who comes. And then the other piece of that is if they're registered for classes, they get that piece of information. Hey, don't forget, you got to get a permit. You can't park here. You can park there. So communication, Philip, is the number one piece of all these puzzles. No questions asked.
And with that, as we kind of get close to closing here,
Yeah.
I do want to ask, a little bit about, kind of everything that we've been through the past year since March of 2020 and, the pandemic. And, hopefully we're on the decline a little bit. And, as I talk to you, I know you're expecting full capacity back on campus for students,
Correct.
Which I know the university is excited about. I know the students are excited about, and hopefully the staff are as well. But it's kind of where we're at in the world. And, just to touch on it a little bit, what would you say is some of the things that you've done on campus, coming back for students that may be coming back? I know you're a big commuter campus, probably
Yep.
a lot of online students, now they're coming back into it. What are some of the changes that they would see on campus? What are some of the things that they can look forward to? Just, kind of talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So initially, the biggest change that they noticed already was obviously the room arrangements and the furniture, as well as in the common gathering spaces. You're going to see less furniture. You're not going to be able to sit on right next to somebody all the time that you want. And we've kind of created those spaces. that are conducive to visiting, but are also safer. Some safer barriers have been put in place in the classrooms as well as in the labs. Services, the wipes, the disinfectant wipes at the computer labs or swipe stations or anywhere there's a common touch point. We're trying to make sure that we're accommodating all the safety concerns and the health risks that go along with that. Not just with COVID, but I think everyone realizes that when we look back at this last year, the number of flu cases was so minuscule and so down. We're on to something, right? With the distancing and the mask and the hand washing, we're on to something because we didn't solve the flu for sure, but we didn't see any flu numbers. So we're on to something. So we're going to carry those protocols forward. In the residence halls, we are expecting to be back full strength, and certainly we're trying to get word out on the hygiene side of things to maybe continue with some of the distancing that you'll have an effect. We're going to release events. We're going to go back full strength. We're not going to have the Weldon, Williams, and Lick seat coverings on our seats that we had, which, by the way, everyone loved. And we use them not just in the arena, though, Philip. We use them in our writing labs and our other areas. If we had a chair, it had your seat covering on it. But so those are some of the things on the campus side. On the parking side, we are going to mailing fulfillment. We've done it in-house 1 year. You and I have talked numerous times about the services that your company provide. So we're certainly looking at those in the coming future because it is pretty labor intensive for us. We're also changing out some computer systems on campus. That's another story, but those students are going to stay on Banner. Faculty and staff are going to Workday, and they don't talk to. It's just a nightmare for parking. But in the future, we're going to go to that. But there's no longer, as many touchless points as possible is what we're going to and what they'll notice. Something that concerns me just as a person who loves to interact, loves to visit, loves to be around people. The thing that bothers me about that is it kind of takes away some of the personalization that the services that we provide. And that leads, I think, to some of those more difficult interactions when something goes wrong. Whereas before, if we're out there in the lots and we're making contacts and we're having those positive interactions, if they get that piece of paper, it's not as impactful as all of a sudden it's just almost like it was robotic. And that concerns me a little bit. So I'm hoping that everybody can continue that state of grace as we go forward in the fall. But basically the biggest things they'll notice are more and more of the touchless points of contact.
Very nice. Well, I believe that would wrap us up on the Park Your Thoughts podcast. Ray, again, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for everything that you're doing at the university and for the community.
Well, absolutely.
We appreciate you guys' partnership. I can't say enough good things about you, your staff, and just the university as a whole. We definitely appreciate you.
Well, thank you. And that goes both ways. Thank you for doing this. And thank you for along the way helping and guide us and supporting us. You know what you do for us and we do. And the community sure does as well. But thank you as well.
Awesome. I got so much out of this. I'm so excited.
Well, I'm looking forward to this going forward. I love it. This is a great idea.